Okay, let's get started. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Tiffany Stevens, and I am the president and CEO of the Jewelers Vigilance Committee. And I'm here with Sarah. Sarah, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone.
Who's our senior counsel at JVC. And thank you so much for being here. If you want to put a shout in the chat box about where you're joining us from, we can get a sense of who's on the line and where you guys are. Along the way, if you have, hi, Miami, oh my gosh, great. If you guys have questions, there's also the Q&A, which I'm sure now you guys have been on many Zoom calls. Georgia, hi. Please pop your questions. Stanley, hi. Please pop your questions into the Q&A, and we will either take those kind of as we go, or we'll do them at the end. We should have time to get to everybody's questions today. So what we're going to talk about today, we've titled it "See You on the Other Side: How to Limit Your Liability Now with the New York." With the decisions that you're making. So, you've probably received a lot of different guidance and advice, and I'm sure you have a great tactical plan on how to survive the immediate time. But we really want to invite you to think about the longer term and make sure that you're not making any short-term decisions that might jeopardize you long term and create any liability for you on the other side of this experience. So, first off, also inviting you to please come check out jvclegal.org. We are a membership organization, if you're not already familiar with us, and we're supported by our members who pay dues and support us in other ways. But during this time, we're opening our resources to the entire jewelry community for free. So please do check us out. And we have built out a special resource hub just to deal with the crisis and to help jewelers specifically deal with the crisis in ways that are bespoke to our industry. So I'm just going to myself type into the chat box here where you can find the page. So you can go check it out after. And we are writing original content on the page every day. And here's an example. You'll see under JVC's notes, those are our original articles, or they're articles that we've sourced from partners or resources we've sourced from partners that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get for free. So we're really trying to bring you some unique things that are going to be helpful. And these change every day. We are tracking the issues as they're developing. So we want to bring the most relevant information to you. And then, of course, the rest of our page, we have all of our usual information about some of the topics we'll actually talk about today. And we have also, if you scroll down past that, can we go back just one, please? So if you scroll down past the slide we just looked at with the original content, you'll see this thing called Legal and Business Resources. And we got together and we figured out what we think are, and it seems to be true so far, the top 7 issues that we think you'll be dealing with in this crisis. And we saw that the first issue were all the employment issues. And then you'll see in descending order here what we think the areas are. And when you're actually on our site, if you click the caret, you'll see a whole list of hyperlinks to, again, thank you, Vanna White moment. You'll see a whole host of things that are unique to JVC and partnerships that we have that will help guide you through these different issues. For example, on the live site, if you look at the employment tab, you'll see a link to an employment law firm that we have a partnership with that you can schedule a free 20-minute consultation with to ask some employment questions if you don't already have your own counsel. So really valuable things under each of those carets when you actually go to the page. And if you don't already, please follow us on Instagram at JVC Legal. We're also on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, but we tend to be the most active on social on Instagram. We post a lot of information there, links, and videos, original videos that we're making to address some of the issues that are coming up. So the other lawyer who works at JVC is not on this call today. Her name is Maya Owens, and she's done a multi-part series on everything you need to know about privacy and data security during this time. So that's just one example of the kind of things you'll find on our Instagram. So please follow us there. And then Sarah and I both also have our own Instagrams, Tiffany C. Stevens and Yud Esquire. And we talk about things from our perspective, and being in the industry and being at JVC that maybe aren't right in the wheelhouse of pure, the super work account of JVC, put a little bit more of our personalities and unique perspectives there. So please follow us too. So before we get into some of the substantive topics we're going to talk about today, I just wanted to take a step back and offer you a framework of how to make decisions now that the world is sort of upside down. So we're titling this "How to Think Like a Lawyer During a Crisis." And I want to share with you sort of a crib sheet of the way that Sarah and I have both been trained to operate in our roles. So when you go to law school, you don't go to law school and like memorize laws. You don't learn the laws because the laws are always changing. And usually the laws change in this sort of undulating motion, somewhat slowly over time. In our current environment, they're changing very, very quickly. So it's really useful to have your overarching framework that you're going to use and plug in all of these changes as they come. We would have to do webinars every day for hours at a time to just brief you on the black and white of what the laws are. So we can give you this framework and way of thinking so you can plug in things as they change and be really self-sufficient and effective in solving the problems that are now coming at you very quickly. So when you go to law school, you learn how to think, and you learn how to think in a high pressure environment and to put your purpose into motion and to prioritize what you're dealing with. So we have put together for you later in this presentation what we think your priorities should be now, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. So that's just a quick introduction to kind of thinking like a lawyer. So to break that down a little bit more, I would invite you to think about an x-axis and a y-axis, and one of them is going to be time and the other is going to be risk. So I'm sure, as you know, now that we're about a month or more into this, it's not like everything changed and so you changed and now you're done. And here we are, right? It's like things are continuing to change. So we want to invite you when you're thinking about any of these legal issues, whether it's your IP portfolio, the way you're dealing with all the employment issues you're facing, think about what you need to do in the immediate term, the medium term, and then the long term to most benefit your business so you can thrive for quite some time. And then against that, on the other axis, you're looking at the types of risk that are in front of you. So whether that's a business risk, risk to the bottom line, or risk to inventory, that's a legal risk, which would be creating certain kinds of liability for yourself. And I'll just make a note here that, in normal times, you always want to limit your liability as much as you can. And from the JVC perspective, we would ideally push you to limit your risk to zero. Now, that's not realistic in normal times, but that's our stance because we always want to be pushing you closer to zero, as close to zero as we can. And then you push back with what you feel like you need to do to make your business decisions. And we come out right somewhere in the middle. And usually we can live with that, and that protects everyone well enough. Unfortunately, in this time, we're all scrambling, we're all tired, we're all panicked. But now more than ever, it's really important to think about your legal risk and trying to get your risk airtight, because on the other side of this, there's going to be a lot of people who need money. And we are anticipating a lot more legal action because unfortunately, it's going to be some lawyers and some people's only remedy to recreate some sense of livelihood for themselves. And certainly if you're doing the wrong thing and actually creating liability for yourself, you will most likely be held accountable for it. And you should be. But what we're concerned about is just any small mistake you might make, or anything that might have the wrong optics, or anything that might invite in claims that are not legitimate, but that nevertheless you would spend time defending yourself against, having to hire your own lawyer, having to produce documents, wasting really valuable time that could be used to firm your bottom line back up after this. So That's what we're concerned about today, is just these kind of, small missteps or things that might create even more liability than usual after this, because people will be going over your activities now, fine tooth comb in the future to try to squeeze out anything they can from people who still have resources. Sorry to take a dystopian view, but that's kind of how we see it. And then the third level of risk that you want to think about, which again is also always around, but I think more relevant now than usual, is the moral risk. And the most immediate and obvious example of this might be employment law issues. If you terminate someone in normal times, nobody wants to be on either side of that conversation or that experience. But we've had a really strong employment landscape for about 10 years now. So it's terrible, but likely someone can go get another job and everyone goes on. If you terminate someone now, they might lose their livelihood. And I know that there are some short-term unemployment benefits right now, but we don't know the length of those. So that's one example. Another example that Sarah might get into when she talks is AML. So you might want to put some of those structural things to the side. They might seem far-fetched right now, but rest assured the Treasury Department will come knocking after this. And also rest assured that the sort of bad guys are having a field day right now with all kinds of nefarious activity and things that fall under the money laundering heading. And we wouldn't want you to get accidentally involved in that unknowingly, because you weren't checking things in the way you usually do because you were stressed out or your mind was elsewhere. So those risks are very real, and we want to make sure that you're thinking about the right now in front of your face, the medium and the long, and sort of plotting out the different types of risk that are real for you and what your appetite is for them and what you think you can and can't take on at this time. So just to illuminate this a little bit more, invite you to put all this to bring life to this structure. Think about the risk that you're solving for on the time axis and the risk axis. Identify the issues that you'll tackle or divide within your team. And reading all the news and being 100% informed and confident is probably not realistic right now because we're moving so quickly. I think it's helpful to create a decision-making hierarchy so you can establish some automatic yeses and automatic nos for whatever issues you're dealing with, and don't make everything have to go through one person because we're all operating so much more quickly than usual. And you might want to spread some of the hierarchy and authority around your organization a little bit more than you would otherwise, which might seem counterintuitive. Some of us, including me, get a little graspy when things get difficult. But I think setting yourself up to be the one and only authority to make decisions is probably not a great idea. And putting a little bit of structure behind how some easier, more routine decisions can get made will relieve you to focus on the things that are actually strategically super important right now. So then once you get some of that off your plate, you can prioritize these issues that you've identified, activate your decision hierarchy as needed. So one example that just comes to mind here would be, they just refilled the coffers of the PPP. So if you have someone on your team who's focused on all the different kinds of state, local, federal relief out there, you sort of appoint that person and have them keep abreast of when those coffers get refilled and what all the different programs are, and just have an automatic yes with them that they will apply for anything they can find, right? That'd be one example. You don't need to approve every single one. And then that's sort of, you've prioritized that, but then you've delegated and it's off your plate. And the important thing here is you want to act and you want to keep moving forward. And then you want to set yourself some time, either with your team or just, alone in the evening, put it on your calendar to reassess and make sure that what made sense 2 weeks ago with the way that you're running things still makes sense today. I think there's going to be a lot of tearing it down and building it back as far as how we're organizing the structure of our working environment, because things are changing so quickly. So I think that reassessment point is something that you want to make sure you have enough time on your calendar to actually do. So with that, I will turn things over to Sarah, who's going to walk us through the legal issues that we think you should be tackling in the order as of today.
Hi, everyone. So today we're going to talk about sort of five important areas, some that are emerging because of this crisis, and some really that are just constants that we want to make sure that you don't forget about as you're, operating your business from home or pausing or whatever it is that you are doing to stay safe. So we're going to talk about anti-money laundering regulations, some thoughts about responsible sourcing, basics about around employment law and sort of what you should be doing now, contracts and retail leasing, and then advertising regulations. So first, I just want to make sure, I'm sure many of you do know about anti-money laundering compliance, but in case you don't, these are regulations that come to the jewelry industry from the Patriot Act and from the Bank Secrecy Act, which was passed in the 1970s. And dealers in precious metals, precious stones, and jewels have to comply. And that compliance actually has been enforced since 2006, not 2016. Sorry about the typo. But penalties for noncompliance are actually pretty severe. So these are very, very important regulations in the jewelry industry. Of course, we don't think that you are laundering money. This is not about the government accusing people of laundering money, although they do, in fact, prosecute this crime. But we want to make sure that jewelry businesses are positioned so that they're not being unknowingly used to launder money or finance terrorism. So, really, it's about positioning yourself to know what your own supply chain looks like and who actually controls the businesses, back in the supply chain and where your goods are actually coming from. So, as I said, the Bank Secrecy Act and the USA Patriot Act are the source of these regulations. And essentially, they state that jewelers have to set up a program to make sure that they're not being used. This is enforced by OFAC, the Office of Foreign Asset Control, and also the IRS. So the way that this would be enforced is if the IRS came to audit your business for bank secrecy compliance. Who else cares about this? The State Department actually super cares about this because they have, jurisdiction to review, foreign corruption, and they want to make sure that the US is, not participating in corrupt schemes around the world or contributing to human rights abuses and things like that. Your bank probably cares about this too. Banks are now getting a lot of pressure from the Treasury Department themselves to make sure that all of their clients are compliant with AML. So if your bank has asked you for this information in the past year, it may be because they too have anti-money laundering obligations and are being asked to comply by the State Department. Your US based customers and suppliers will care about this because part of their own AML program is making sure that everybody that they deal with has an AML program. And of course, we want to remind you that there are cash reporting requirements if you accept cash in payment for goods over $10,000 for a single transaction or a related transaction. The IRS requires that you fill out a form, the 8300 form, about that. So, as I said before, dealers who do $50,000 or more in the purchase and sale of covered goods have to have a program. Covered goods are precious stones, precious metals, and jewelry made from those products if 50% or more of the value is derived from the precious stones or precious metals. So that means that, like, if you're selling a lucite cuff with some turquoise embedded in it, probably not covered under the rules. But anything where 50% or more of the value is coming from those gems. So if it's lucite, but there's diamonds in there, then that's probably covered. And just a note on that as well, the term dealers used in these regulations really just covers anybody who purchases and sells these products. There is, however, a retailer exemption from these rules. So if you're a retailer and you only have US based suppliers and you do not purchase gold from the public or anything from estate sales, then you're exempt from these regulations and you don't need to comply or have a program. But if you do any of those activities that I said, you do have to have a compliant AML program. It looks a little bit different from the program that dealers have because your program will only apply to those activities that knock you out of the exemption. So it's generally a shorter and smaller program, but you are required to have one. So one of the things that we've been thinking about as we start to help people think about what their business looks like after this crisis is responsible sourcing. And your AML program is one part of a broader strategic responsible sourcing plan. Of course, AML is just, itself one part of a multi-agency governmental effort to combat corruption and terrorism. But what AML does, or how it really functions here, is that it provides a framework for asking questions of your suppliers and stepping back into the supply chain. Um, your compliance officer, who is the person at the business who is in charge of making sure that the AML program is functioning and that people are following it, is empowered by the regulations to check KYC information, that's know your customer or know your counterparty identification, and to sort of just be aware of global financing conversations, regulations that are coming out of Treasury, um, changes to the list of people who were, who are specially designated nationals. So those are people that we as U.S. citizens cannot do business with, and really it empowers you as a business to make frequent evaluation of your supply chain a normal part of your operations, and to place value in prioritizing ethical values. So we think that the conversation about responsible sourcing is only going to get bigger and stronger as we move through this crisis because of course, we know that our supply chain is not just about what we're providing for customers. It's also providing remuneration all the way back in the supply chain to the people who mine our goods, and this supports families, across the world. And so we want to make sure that we're doing that in a healthy way. So we have some two suggestions of partners that we have worked with in the past where you can find more resources. And of course, this is the health of your supply chain is going to matter more than ever. And maybe you're sitting at home right now and thinking, gosh, I really have a little bit more time on my hands than I thought I would. How should I spend that time? Maybe now is the time to step back into your supply chain and evaluate whether your partners are prioritizing health, safety, and sustainability. Um, Customers want to spend money responsibly with companies who are doing this. You could even take some time to map your business to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. These are goals that the UN has developed, and companies are selecting goals that they say, okay, I know that my company can contribute to this. So the first is Christina Miller. Christina is a sustainable jewelry consultant, and she has lots of services available. And if you want to go to her website and, and take a look at what she offers, that's a good way to sort of get started. And then in addition, of course, there's the Responsible Jewelry Council. They are a third party audited standards and certification organization for supply chain integrity. So essentially, it's sort of a way to confirm to others that you are looking at your supply chain and making sure it's secure. And one of the things that's great about the RJC is that their code of practices, which is what you get audited against, is available for free on their website as a resource. So you can, even if you're not going to pursue the RJC as an option, but you want to sort of look at, okay, what should I start to think about? You can download their code of practices and just start going through it and figuring out, okay, do I do this? Yes, no. Okay, what should I change so that in order I can do that? That is all available to you. So I'll talk a little bit about employment law, which of course is a really, really big conversation that lots of organizations are having right now. And of course, employment, as Tiffany said, it's a complex area of law, even in normal times. And right now, things are changing quite literally by the minute. Um, so you may be thinking, or you may have already laid off employees and are trying to figure out how you're going to be able to retain people. Maybe you're making salary reductions and things like that. Of course, like that is absolutely a thing to consider at the moment. One piece that you may not have thought of in terms of being able to retain employees is that in the first COVID relief bill that was passed by Congress and signed into law, they provided two different types of leave that are available now. The first is 2 weeks of paid sick leave if an employee has a diagnosis of COVID-19, if they're suspected to have COVID-19, or if they're caring for somebody in their immediate family who does have that, they are eligible to take up to 2 weeks of paid sick leave. The pay is capped, but this is your company will pay for this upfront, but they will get a tax credit from the federal government for this sick leave. And that will come in the quarterly payroll taxes that you pay to the government. So if you have employees who have to be out, that law, that 2 week law also applies to anybody who is under a government stay at home or quarantine order. So that is a way that you can maybe retain some employees and still be able to pay them for a little bit extra time if they are quarantined, but you would like to use that tax credit to pay them, you can do that. In addition, there is new Family Medical Leave Act leave, that's FMLA, and that is specifically for employees who are now having to stay at home to care for children because their childcare is no longer available. Either the school is closed or their daycare is closed or their nanny can't come, travel to work for you or whatever it is, whatever childcare options you have. This leave is available for up to 10 weeks. And again, this is a credit that is paid for by the government. The pay for that is capped. It's only $200 a week, but that is definitely better than $0 per week. So that is also an option. And that leave can also be taken intermittently. So if somebody is sharing childcare duties with a co-parent and they're both trying to work their jobs and maybe, one parent is going to work 3 days a week and the other one can work two and they're going to take that FMLA leave intermittently, they can do that. So make sure that if you have an HR person or if you have somebody at your business who generally deals with that, that they're up on that law and make sure that employees know that that is an option for them. Of course, there's good question. There's a question that do small businesses under 10 employees have to follow this rule? I assume that is talking about the sick leave or the FMLA leave. And I do believe that this leave is available for businesses under 50 employees. However, the Department of Labor does have discretion to change those rules if it would be harmful to businesses under 50 employees. So I'd keep an eye out about that. But for now, yes, those leave options are available. One other thing to note about the FMLA leave is that generally, in order to take FMLA leave, you have to have been employed for a year in order to be eligible. For this, Congress changed those rules, and somebody only has to have been employed for 30 days in order to be eligible to take the FMLA leave. So great question. Thank you so much for asking that. Of course, oh, sorry. There we go. Of course, protected class liabilities are going to be waiting on the other side. That means you cannot use COVID-19 as an excuse to fire somebody that you wanted to fire because they're pregnant or something else like that. You still can't do that. You cannot fire somebody because they're pregnant, or because they are a different race than you, or other things like that. So please make sure that, as you're dealing with, layoffs and retention and things like that, that you're making sure that you're still following all of those regular rules. And if you want more information about that, the Department of Labor and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission also have information on that. If you do have to terminate or lay off or furlough employees, I would encourage employees to file for unemployment immediately. We know that states are really, really struggling to keep up with the unemployment numbers and having a hard time getting money out to people who are unemployed. So employees really should file for unemployment, as soon as humanly possible. If you are still open, or if you are um, thinking about reopening, it is legal to ask employees to share if they've been tested for COVID-19 or if they've been diagnosed for COVID-19. However, that is private medical information. So HIPAA applies. You have to keep that information confidential. If somebody in your workplace does test positive for COVID-19, obviously you can tell them that they need to go home and stay home for 14 days. And you should tell your employees that somebody near them has tested positive, but you can't tell them who it is. And I know obviously in some smaller locations, it's probably going to be fairly obvious, but that is the law. You have to keep that information private. In addition, you can require that if employees are coming back to work, that you conduct a temperature check. That is the EEOC has qualified that is available, that to be used. However, again, that is a medical test, so it has to be done in private in a non-invasive way. So that means getting like a laser digital thermometer or something like that, so that it's not invasive. And you'll have to make sure that, again, that information has to be private. So some questions in the chat about small businesses having to offer those FMLA options, or is it something that you can offer at our own discretion? No, this is required by law. So you do have to offer the sick leave and the FMLA options. As I said before, the Department of Labor does have discretion to look at that, to change the regulations for businesses with under 50 employees. And they may do that. They haven't yet. So that's something to keep an eye out for. But yes, small businesses do have to offer these options. Again, the pay, like the money that you will pay to employees for this, will be reimbursed in your quarterly taxes by the federal government. And there's a question about, is the employee legally required to disclose that information? I assume that's information about diagnosis. That's not a question I can answer right now, but we can definitely look into that. So again, I want you to remember that there have always been these categories of employees that we've had to pay attention to. So whether someone is exempt from overtime or not exempt from overtime, that will affect you if you have, let's say you have an employee who gets sick. So they work on Monday and Tuesday, and then they get sick and they don't work on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If that is somebody who's non-exempt from overtime, so they're an hourly worker, you will only need to pay them for the hours that they worked. So you only pay them for Monday and Tuesday. If that is someone who is salaried and is exempt from overtime and they only work Monday, Tuesday, but then they don't work Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you still need to pay them for the full amount for the full week. That is just a regular employment law rule. And you'll need to make sure that you are following that correctly for your employees. For part-time, full-time, again, the same rules apply. If you have a part-time employee and again, they only work Monday, Tuesday, and then they don't work the rest of the week, you only pay them for the time that they worked. And if you have a part-time salaried employee and the same thing happens, you only pay them their normal salary for the week, even if they only worked 1 or 2 days. And of course, you might have employees in other states. This is just a reminder that employment law can be very, very local. There's lots of regulations here in New York City that we don't have even outside of New York City. So make sure that you're paying attention to local law about this. We recommend that you actually seek out employment counsel in this area. Answers to these questions are often very, very, very local. So it's worth the spend on employment counsel if you have some specific questions. And there's a question about what is the trigger for FMLA, whether it's employee request or the fact that they're staying home for childcare purposes. Um, yeah, so you actually are required by law to let your employees know that FMLA leave might be available to them. There is a poster that the Department of Labor has set up to tell employees this. There's a link to this on the JVC website under the COVID tab and employment. So you can download that poster and make sure that all of your employees get it. So yes, the employee would then let you know that they are requesting to take FMLA leave based on the fact that they are staying home for childcare purposes. If they're laid off due to lack of work, the FMLA doesn't apply because they're no longer employed by you. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tiffany to talk about retail leasing and contracts.
Thank you, Sarah. So just one thing that came up in the chat about if people are required to disclose it, and I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head either, but we have gotten guidance that one thing you can do is sort of have a sign-in, the way that you might have a sign-in sheet for hourly employees. You can have a sign-in sheet that's a wellness sort of declaration. And you can, as people, if you're having people come into the office every day, you can have them sign something that says that they've taken their temperature in the last day at home, and that they, to their knowledge, that they don't have any symptoms. That way you don't have to constantly ask them, because if you want to know this information, but again, it can be turned against you, or you can make mistakes. You don't want to harass anybody, and you certainly don't want to single anybody out and ask them. So maybe it's easier if you have a blanket approach and you just have all of your employees attest to their wellness every time they come in. And then you also have a written record of that or whatever. So it's sort of, it protects you, and it's also a little bit of more of a low key way for people to make that disclosure or not, and maybe make it a little easier for them to stay home if they know that they're going to have to come in and make that declaration. So, okay, so jumping over to retail leasing and contracts. So we think the next big category of things after employment are all of the different kinds of contracts that you might be part of as part of your business. A big one is your lease. Most people are tenants, some are landlords, but we're looking at things from the sort of tenant side of things today. So first of all, in any sort of commercial contract that you are entered into, you might have a force majeure clause that lets you be able to sort of cancel the contract in the event of unforeseeable events, such as this situation, which is clearly beyond our control. So that's been used quite a bit. It's now that it's been a month or so, people are pushing back against that. And we saw this also used quite a bit during Brexit, interestingly enough. But some do carve out for viruses, because we have seen, SARS and other things in other parts of the world. So you might have a contract that specifically carves out viruses. You want to just take a look. So it's worth a look, whether that's by you or kind of going back to that framework. If you delegate to someone on your team, pull out your lease, pull out your vendor agreements, pull out your insurance policies, and really read them and see what you've committed to and what other people have committed to you, because you want to make sure that they're going to make good on that too. One example of that would be business interruption insurance, which is usually part of your larger property coverage. You might be covered for business interruption insurance for this situation. The insurance industry is lobbying on the Hill now and has also sort of united around really not wanting to pay people for this interruption. So you might be in for a little bit of a fight. The restaurant industry has actually created a whole organization to push back against the insurance industry. So this is sort of a very current topic. If you have that kind of coverage, I think it's worth fighting for. Again, some insurers are quite savvy and did carve out explicitly viruses, so worth reading. But if they haven't carved out viruses, it's worth the fight, I think. I mean, they'll make an argument that this isn't the sort of thing that they were insuring you against. They were insuring you against some sort of unforeseen physical specific damage. But I would just say that this issue is very much up in the air, and you might get covered for it. So don't give up on it before you put some fight behind it. If you're part of litigation, ongoing litigation, you can track the court closures on our website. We have a live tracker to the different court closures under the retail leasing contracts carrot on our COVID site. And for that matter, we've also actually just added, thanks to Sarah, a 50-state survey of all the different COVID laws and regulations that are developing across the 50 states. If you want to use that as a touchstone and come to the JVC page first, check out your state. And then if you see something, maybe double check it with your locality, but it might be a nice way to keep your eye on what's going on. And certainly if you operate in multiple states, worth a look to see how things are changing. I'm going to skip the acquisition part. But we would just say our recommendation on the commercial contracts piece is that you might be able to cancel, if you haven't already, I mean, we are a month into this now, you might be able to cancel some of the contracts you can't fulfill. And likewise, people might be coming to you to try to cancel contracts that you're part of. On the leasing part, it's a little bit different. On general commercial contracts, I think we would advise that you read them with, either with someone on your team or on your own, and really kind of create your own strategy. Like, do you want to cancel this contract? Do you want to see it through? Do you want to kind of renegotiate? What can you do? And go at it with a preconceived strategy. On your lease, we would suggest, if you haven't already, that use communication and not go in with a sort of warrior mindset, but really go in with an open mind and just try to talk things through with your landlord. Find the kind of flexibility that will work for both of you. I think we're all in a situation, both tenants and landlords, of wanting things to work. And we've been seeing through our membership a lot of flexible agreements happening, whether that's reducing your rent, getting other kinds of relief, skipping a few months of rent and having your lease extend a little bit longer. There are all different kinds of things. It's just worth communicating with an open mind. We've seen members have some success there. And again, please reread your lease, even though I know leases can sometimes be insane. Commercial leases can be insanely long with a million addendums and so forth. But look for the operating hours, common areas, cessation of business, abandonment or vacation of leased space as some clauses to hone in on and see if you might have some leverage there, because the landlord can't fulfill some of the things that they've promised you in those categories. And that might help you go into your conversation with some leverage. And again, like it doesn't have to be a binary decision of I pay in full for my lease or I break it. There's like a lot of room in between. So please keep that in mind and just have open communication with your landlord. And we can go to the next. Okay, so we will toggle back to some of your existing legal obligations that you have. And these are always true. There are a lot of guides that we have a video, other things on our website under how to advertise jewelry. There's this federal agency called the Federal Trade Commission, and they tell us how we can and can't advertise jewelry. They also tell us how we can and can't make environmental or green claims, how we can and can't work with social media influencers. So this really all comes to life in advertising. And in normal times, that might be in print, that might be with a sales person having a verbal discussion with someone, but in our new digital only environment, that's going to be online. So all of these same concepts apply online, and they're a little bit harder to follow online because you have limited space. You often have limited characters. If you're on social media platforms, if you're designing a beautiful website, you might want to have a lot of white space. You want it to be sparse. You don't want to have a lot of density of words. But please keep in mind that there are a lot of specific ways you can and can't talk about jewelry and advertise jewelry. And, if you're the key here is just to disclose what it is you're actually selling and to make it really obvious to the average person, whether it's a lab grown or a natural diamond, for example, or exactly what the caratage is on gold, all of these different things. What if it's a natural pearl or a cultured pearl, or all these different things that you have to disclose. So please check us out to understand the specifics there. And we're going to be releasing a guide to walk you through the specifics of it with some special emphasis on the social media part in the next about 3 weeks. We're going to have something ready for you that is going to be free to the industry. So yeah, just make sure that you are doing that, because again, coming back to the theme of today's talk, this is an easy one for you to create liability for yourself, because if someone screenshots it, they've got it forever. And people can sort of complain about you to the FTC, or they can bring action against you to say that you're being deceptive and that you're advertising things wrong. So it's really important to be on top of this, not only to do the right thing to limit your liability from the FTC coming after you, but from your competitors or other people in the industry too. And we see this quite a lot because the JVC has a mediation practice where we have people in industry sort of telling on each other all the time. So unfortunately, people are watching you, and if you slip up, we don't want you to have to deal with some sort of a problem there. If you need help, we are happy to coach you through any questions that you have and to look at your website with you. If you are applying for JVC membership, this is a part of the application process. And before we approve you for membership, we make sure that you've leveled up and that your website and social media presence is compliant. We have launched a new service for this one. Is one of the only things that's for members, just because we only have 3 lawyers on staff. You can schedule 20 minutes to talk to me, Sarah, or Maya, the other attorney on our team. And if you want to spend that time, we'd be happy to go through your website with you and screen share and coach you through how you might need to change your website or how you might need to change your social media presence to make sure that you're following the variety of FTC guides that we all need to follow. So I'm just looking at the chat to make sure no one asked me anything while I was talking. It looks like it's all employment, which holds, there's been a lot of employment questions. I know we all have a lot. So I would just say to start to wrap up here, a lot of people are backing you up and are supporting your success, not just because they know you in the industry and they like you as a human, although that is certainly true. We are an interdependent industry, and your colleagues and friends all have a shared interest in your success and the success of our industry as a whole, because we all want to have an industry to come back to. Obviously, state and local governments are funding things and want to make sure that you succeed as a business on both sides of the supply chain. There's a lot of people around the world counting on your success. Their families are counting on your success. And there are a lot of organizations like JVC in the industry that are set up. There's sort of an invisible architecture here to support you. We're here scanning the horizon for danger on the legal part, translating all that to you. We're very active, and we don't talk about this a lot publicly, but we're extremely active with different federal agencies, making sure that the jewelry perspective is taken into account before any new policy is written and before policy is enforced. For another example, JSA is looking out for you, working closely with the FBI and local police departments to make sure that security is on point and that your safety and the safety of your business and the goods in your business are being monitored and protected. Other organizations support the trade, education, quality, consumer confidence. There are advertising campaigns being created right now for this moment that'll be shared with you for free. All kinds of things. So please take advantage of those. The Jeweler Support Network is an initiative launched by DPA that's sort of a landing page that has information from all of these different industry organizations, so you can grab the help that you need. And we also just sort of on not a I don't know if it's a lighter note or a more serious note, but you we feel that we see that jewelry is something that humans have desired since antiquity, and it's a primal need for not only on this practical point of people's livelihoods depending on it, but there is something about jewelry that humans tend to desire. And I think we can find a lot of confidence and meaning in that, and know that that will still be there on the other side of this, but we will all be transformed in the way that we deliver what we deliver and the distribution networks and so forth. But we feel really confident that jewelry is magic, and the desire for jewelry will lived on well before us, and will live on for many years. So Sarah, do you want to say anything in closing? Do you want to wrap up for us?
Yeah, I would just want to say that I encourage you all to think as holistically as possible about your business and what it's going to look like on the other side of this. Of course, at JVC, we exist because of you. We exist to support you, and we are going to be here through this to do that. But this also means that you have to take the time to really think about, okay, what do I look like now, and what do I want to look like in the future? We're doing that too at JVC. We're looking at our entire operation because, of course, we've shifted our office from being an in person office to everybody working from home. And we're doing that same transformational look, trying to see, okay, what works? What do we now have the opportunity to change for the better because we're in this really, really, really strange situation? So I encourage you all to take the opportunity to do that as well. And also, please do reach out. We are available to help you. Again, as Tiffany said, there's tons of resources that are normally not available to the public are now available on our website. But our contact information is here as well. And we encourage you to get in touch and let us help you. So if anybody has any further questions that they'd like to ask us, we have a couple of minutes left in the session, and we'll be happy to answer those. Okay, great. So we got a question in the Q&A about whether the employer pays the FMLA or is it government paid. The answer to that is actually both. So the employer will pay the FMLA leave first, but then the government will credit you for like a dollar for dollar credit for the amount that you paid in FMLA on your quarterly tax payments. So that means, yes, the employer does need to lay out that money first to pay the employee who's taking the FMLA leave, but it will be reimbursed dollar for dollar by the federal government. And there's a question about, does the FMLA only apply to salaried workers or hourly as well? It applies to everybody, but there is that cap. So it's paid at 2/3 of your normal wages or salary, but capped at $200 a day. And I apologize earlier, I misspoke and said it was $200 a week, but that was incorrect. It's $200 a day. So that means the entire total amount that somebody could get paid under using this FMLA leave is $10,000. If there's any other questions, please go ahead and pop them in the Q&A. And ooh, two more. The question is, does the FMLA leave pay reimbursement from the government also include employers' tax amounts? I have absolutely no idea of the answer to that question, but I assume that there's lots of law firms out there who have put out information about this. So I would do some advanced Googling to find the answer to that. And do we have to pay that while our business is forced closed or only after we open again? If you still have employees and they want to take leave under these reasons, you still need to offer that to them. If you have instead laid off or furloughed employees, then you do not need to offer it to them because they're no longer your employees. We've got about 5 more minutes left. So if you have any other questions, please let us know. And if not, I can give you a weather report from New York City. It is currently gray and not windy. That's what I got. Tiff, how is it on Long Island?
Same. Ready for some warm weather.
Absolutely.
Well, this is our contact information. Please reach out if you guys have questions. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you're well and you're taking good care of yourself, and let us know how we can help.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye. Oh, one more. Oh, it snowed this morning on Long Island. Okay, I missed that. Thank you, Tatiana.
Thanks for the report. All right. Take care, everybody.